No.
Good evening. We're ready to get started. Tonight we're learning Maseches, Pesachim, Daf Nun Aleph. Good to see all of you. We're beginning on the bottom of Daf Nun Amud Beis, about 7-8 lines from the bottom at the Tanu Rabbanon. Just to finish up one last piece from yesterday, the Gemara writes, quoting a brisa, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught us, Kosvei, Svarim, Tefillin, and Mezuzos, the people who are the Sofrei Stam. That's where the acronym comes from, Stam. Svarim, it's really Sefer Torah, Tefillin and Mezuzos. These people, Hein v'Tagrehen v'Tigrei Tagrehen, all of the merchants, the wholesalers and the retailers, all of them. So all of these people are considered to be in the following category, and as well others. Even people who sell tcheles, all of them, Einan roen siman bracha le'olam. They are not going to see a siman bracha. But it's not fair. Who would have ever thought? That's yesterday's Gemara that says that the reason why was because we had to make sure that we still had people doing this. So the kaf daled ta'anesios, the 24 fasts, to make sure that these people would not make a killing, so that they wouldn't retire. So it says the Gemara, however, im oskin lishma roin. If a person were to do so lishma, they were writing sifrei stam and they were doing so lishma, then a Kadosh Baruch Hu will give them schar b'olam hazeh v'olam haba. They'll have they will see siman bracha because they're not going to go anywhere. They're going to help the Jews. We know, of course, that our Mishnah is speaking about minhagim. We said that when a person goes from one place to another, so you have to take the chumras of both the place you're coming from and the place you're going to. There's a flaw in the question, which we'll analyze a little bit later, because it's not always the case that there's a flaw in the place that you're coming from and to. Either the place keeps the chumrah or they don't. So we're going to answer that question a little bit later, but. Speaking of Dinei D'Rabbanan, the Gemara here presents at 5 lines from the bottom at the 2 dots, something that references a halacha, a Din D'Rabbanan that we learned in Maseches Shabbos, which is that one should not go on a boat within 3 days of Shabbos on a long trip. So it says the Gemara, B'nei Baishan, people of this city, of Baishan, Nahug Delo Havu Azlan Mitzur Letzidum Ramale Shabsa. They wouldn't even take a short boat ride on Ma'ale Shabsa, on Erev Shabbos. And the children of these people wanted to know if that was true. So Asu Benaihu Kamet Rav Yochanan, the children of the people of Baishan came over to Rav Yochanan. Amrulo, the children said to him, they said to Rav Yochanan as follows, Avahasin Efsharlahu. So okay by him that he has one set of standards. Anan lo Efsharlan. What about us? Are we supposed to be keeping the same halacha? Amar Lui said to them, it's already the case that you should be following what your father does. That a person should keep the standards of their parents. We should keep our minhagim. So the poskim speak about this. What about a person who's a Baal Tshuva? So my parents are Baalei Tshuva. So that my Ladina, am I obligated to keep every last minhag that my parents had? So that's a real shaila in the poskim. And according to many poskim, where there was a break in the Masorah, so because there was a break in the Masorah, so then a person's allowed to keep any mainstream Ashkenazi psak if you're Ashkenaz, a mainstream Sephardi psak if you're Sephard, whatever the case may be. As long as it's mainstream and normative, you can pick your own. So I have a first cousin who keeps all the minhagei agra. Okay, so you're allowed to do that when you have a broken Masorah. Then you're allowed to there's some kind of latitude. But otherwise, Shema b'ni Musar Avicha, 2 lines before the end of the page. We learned about this a number of blot ago about what is considered a bar chimutz. What are the things that leaven? And there was a machlokes in the Gemara and the Tanaim about whether or not orez v'dochan, rice and millet, were considered to be part of the world of that which leavens. So says the Gemara, B'nei Choza'e nage demifr shechala me'aroza. The people from Choza'ah, from the city of Choza'ah, they used to be mafresh challah from rice bread, from the dough that they would make for rice bread. Says the Gemara, also Amr Leila Rav Yosef. They came to Rav Yosef and they told him about this strange custom, because we paskin Ladina that rice doesn't become chametz. It's not a bar chimutz. So what do you mean you're mafresh truma? What is that? That's a zero. That's like being mafresh truma from water. There's no value in it. It's not anything. It's not a bar chimutz. So how can you be mafresh challah? I said mafresh truma, that's incorrect. But how to be mafresh challah? So it says the Gemara, Amar Lahu, Rabbi Yosef said to them, Nechla zar be'apayhu, just to show you how severely I disagree with you. When you're mafresh the challah on rice bread, I want to have a non-kohen take a bite out of it, just to show you that what you're talking about is ridiculous. We don't hold that way. Rice is not a bar chimutz. You're not yotzei the mitzvah of matzah with rice bread, and you are not going to violate the isser deraisa of chametz with rice bread, and you're certainly not going to be mafresh challah with rice bread. Have a yisrael take a bite out of the challah that you were mafresh from rice bread. It's a zero. Eisvei, the Gemara asks against Rabbi Yosef's comment. What does the Gemara ask against him? Let's say that there's something that technically speaking is mutter, but you have a family custom, and your family custom is nagu ban iser. So turning to the top of Nun Aleph and Aleph, the Gemara says, you're not allowed to be matir in front of them. So that doesn't seem to work in regards to the sheet of Rav Yosef. How could you be so in your face? Your mom is standing there and saying shakol niebid baro on a piece of dough. You're standing there and you're eating the rice flour, the rice dough flour. That's not right. That's not right. If it's dvarim hamutarim shenuagu ben iser, you have no right to do that in their face. And that's not okay. The answer is the Gemara, top line, Amar lo v'lavmi itmar Allah. Didn't we already learn Amar Rav Chizda bekutai? When do we have the rule that iyata rishai lahatirim bifneihem? When do we have a rule that you're not allowed to do that? That's in front of a kusai, in front of a person who is in the category of a kusi, someone who is not so from. So says the Gemara, but wait a minute, kusai my timer. What's the reason by a kusi we have this rule that you're not allowed to show a leniency here? Mishum de misrachei milsa, we're afraid that they're going to misunderstand something. Misrachei milsa is a famous language in Shas of srach, that we're afraid we have srach bita, we have srach tuma. That's why we hold when we wash netilas yadayim. This is the din. The Shulchan Aruch speaks about this. When we wash our hands for netilas yadayim for anything, we should be pointing our hands up. So some quote the pasuk, we should point our hands up. There's a secondary reason, which is that when you pour water, and if water touches a higher part of your arm, then you turn your hand back over, so then your hands can become tana again. You should hold your hands upwards in order to do that because of srach tuma. There's another application of srach, which is in regards to srach bita. Srach bita is a halacha by Hilchos Tvila, when a woman who's a nida, who completes her nida cycle and sheva nakim, when she goes to the mikvah, we almost never, there are exceptions, but we almost never allow a woman to go to the mikvah during the day. Even if it's past the full 7th day, it's the 8th day, it's the 9th day, it's the 10th day. We almost never, unless there's danger, we almost never let a woman go to the mikvah during the day because of srach bita. We're afraid that someone might misunderstand. The daughter might think that, hey, I can go to the mikvah during the 7th day. This is another application of srach. Srach milsa, we're afraid that the kusi will misunderstand. So it says the Gemara, but hanich inshi name srachin milsa. We're concerned anyways that people will misunderstand. What were we talking about? We're talking about dough that's made out of rice flour. I'm concerned no matter what happens. You're not allowed to shirkid u'shanam mitzvah savet sivanu ala frashas chala. It's rice. It doesn't count for afrashas chala, so it's srach no matter what. We're generating concern either way. So that's why the Gemara has a different answer. Amar Rav Ashi chazinan iruban orez achle. If most of the food that they eat is rice, so then lo nechla zar be'apayu. In that case, we would not have a non-kohen eat the rice flour in front of them. Dilma mishtakach toras chalaminai, because since they almost never eat grains, they only eat rice bread. If we make fun of what they're doing and in their face we show them that the rice flour is a zero, maybe they will forget all of the halachos of hafrashas chal. Anyways, that's why we wash netilas yadayim now. Netilas yadayim now is not based on Yisrael; it's based on Kohanim in the Mikdash. But we do it now. We want to make sure that we remember how to treat things that are kadosh in the Mikdash for the Kohanim. So that's why we wash. So here too, if everything that they eat is going to be rice oriented, so then we're concerned that maybe someone will forget the halachas of challah, and therefore we allow for them to be mafresh the challah. The Ruban Dagan Achle, if most of the food that they eat is Dagan, most of the food they eat is the Chameshes Mine Dagan, barley, rye, oat, wheat, spelt, browse is the acronym. These are the 5 types of grains that do leaven, that do create chametz and do generate matzah. So then if that's what they normally eat, and then they started making a rice meal, then Nechla Zar Be'apai, then you could eat a mamish in their face, till Masi La'afrushim Min Achiv Ala Patr Min Apatr Ala Chiv. Because if we don't make the distinction between that which they normally eat, which is Chameshes Mine Dagan, the barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt, and the rice, then you're just going to push it, make a mistake. That's already brachos levatala, right and left. You'll think that rice needs it. You'll think that chameshes mine dagan don't. There we need to draw a line in the sand. But that's when your diet is primarily chameshes mine dagan. So that's the distinction the Gemara makes. We're about 10 lines down in Aleph from an Aleph. The Gemara continues, having quoted what we just learned, and we're going to analyze it with a triple question from our Gemara. Gufa. We just learned if there's something that's technically mutter, but others have a minhag to be oser, then the halacha is you're not allowed to push against the system. Yes, technically, Medina, what you're talking about is mutter, but here we don't allow for rebellion. You're not allowed to say that that thing is aser. And the Gemara says, wait a minute, what did we say there? Amar of Chizda bekusay askinan. We said that that's only true by a kusi. That Gemara says, What about the rest of the world who are not B'nai Kusi? So says the Gemara, here are 3 examples. Example number 1, 1/3 of the way down Vatanya, the Brisa writes, Rochtzen Shnei Achim Ke'echad. The halacha is if there are 2 people who are full blood brothers, they are allowed to go to the mikvah, and they are allowed to, it's not considered a violation of pritzus for 2 brothers to go to the mikvah together, totally fine. It's mutter midina. However, ve'ein rochtzen shnei achim beKabul. In the city of Kabul, I don't believe that it's the same city of Kabul that we have today. I highly doubt it, but nevertheless, it is called that. And the halacha is in Kabul, not the halacha. The minhag in Kabul is that 2 brothers could not go to the mikvah together. Umayse v'Yehuda v'Hillel. There were 2 boys, Yehuda and Hillel, banav shel Rabban Gamliel. They were the 2 sons of Rabban Gamliel. Sherachzu shnein ke'echad beKabul. They both went to the Beis HaMerchatz. They both went to the mikvah. The 2 of them, brothers, they went to the mikvah, and they went there together. V'loaz alei and kol Medina. Everyone was talking about them. Loaz, right? They were saying rumors about them. And everyone was talking about Amru. They said in the city of Kabul, "Miyameinu lo ra'inu kach." We've never seen such a thing that brothers would go to the mikvah together. It's not appropriate. It's pritzus. Not that it's usher, but it's our minhag. So it says the Gemara, "V'nishmat Hillel." One of the brothers left the room. V'yatza lebeis hachitzon. He left the inner sanctuary of the Beis HaMerchatz, and he went to the outer sanctuary just to let everybody know. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that in this city that brothers can't. I didn't realize. I know that Ladina, technically, brothers are allowed to be in the Beis HaMerchatz together. I didn't know that in Kabul you had such stringencies. He didn't push back and say, by the way, you should just know it's mutar Ladina. He just embraced their minhag. That's question number 1 that we asked, which is that we see here that he didn't push back at all. So we see that we don't allow for the rebellion of the minhag. It's not only by a kusi, where we have the stringency of iyata r'shay la'achrim b'fneim. Even Hillel didn't want to say it in front of them, and he's not a kusi. He was a Talmud Chacham. That was example 1. Example 2, Yotzin b'kur de kison b'Shabbos. The Meforshim here point out kur de kison. Rashi writes this out. They're shoes that are rechavim. They're very wide. And it was a type of shoe, whatever it was, whatever the details are. So a type of shoe that they wore, Yotzin b'kor the kison b'Shabbos. However, ve'ein Yotzin b'kor the kison b'Shabbos b'Biri. In the city of Biri, you weren't allowed to wear those shoes. So again, technically speaking, it's mutter. But we have a minhag that it's aser, but only in the city of Biri. Umaysa Yehuda v'Hillel, the same 2 sons, the son of Rabban Gamliel, banav shel Rabban Gamliel, sheyatzu b'kor the kison b'Shabbos b'Biri. They didn't know. They thought it was mutter because it is mutter. They were in a place that had a minhag l'isser, but they didn't realize that it was a minhag l'isser. So they were wearing the kor the kison, these wider shoes. V'lo'azah le'en Medina, halfway down an aleph and aleph, everyone was talking about them. V'amru, they said in the city of Biri, miyameinu lo re'inu kach. Who in their right mind would wear these shoes? It's not usher. It's not usher. But we have a minhag that it's not appropriate. Ushmatum unesanum la'avdei. They immediately took off their shoes and they gave them to their avadim to indicate, okay, we embrace your minhag. We embrace your minhag. V'lo ratu lomar lahen mutar natem. They didn't want to push back and say that really you guys are all wrong. Technically speaking, it's mutar. Hillel and it was Rabbi Yehuda. Hillel and Yehuda embraced the local minhag of Biri and they gave the shoes to their avadim. They just didn't wear those shoes.
Is it because that would be a sign of carrying on Shabbos while the mikveh is not?
We will see. The Gemara is going to analyze how each of these 3 have concerns. That's absolutely good. Here, the concern is that they may fall off and you'll end up carrying them. Not dissimilar to shofar and other concerns that we have about carrying on Shabbos. So we'll get there in a few minutes. That's a great question, Michael. The Yoshvan, here's the third question. Here's the third question we're going to ask against Rav Chizda's principle that the only time we say that you're not allowed to act is when the person is a kusi, because it's not true by Yehuda and Hillel. We see twice they didn't rebel against the system. Here's example number 3, exactly halfway down. A person is allowed to sit on the benches of a nachri on Shabbos. We're not concerned about mekach or memkar. It doesn't look like you're buying anything. Medina, it's mutter. But in the city of Akko, they had a minhag. So it's something that's mutter. But there was a minhag in Akko not to do it. You're not allowed to sit on the safsalim, on the benches of a nachri, because it looks like you're doing mekach or memkar. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was sitting on one of these benches. He sat down on some of these benches that belong to non-Jews. Everyone's like shegets. The guy's sitting down on benches that belong to a nachri. This looks like, it smells like, it's mutter, but it smells like mekach or memkar. It's not allowed. Amru, they said, miyameinu lo re'inu kach. We've never seen this happen in the city of Akko. Nishmat al gabe karka. He's like, fine, I got it. I'll sit on the ground. So he didn't sit on the benches of the nachri. He sat on the ground. Mutar natem. So our triple question we asked from mikvah and we asked about the shoes, and we asked about the benches. In all three cases, we saw that people who are not kusim, these are talmidim chachamim, matzumim, that they did not say that it's mutter. They behaved as though they were kusim. Why would you do that? They're talmidim chachamim. Rav Chizah said it's only kusim, not everybody else. So all three of these cases argue with that. So answers the Gemara, B'nei Medinas, there's different girsos here. What my Gemara has is B'nei Medinas Hayam Nami. But there's a different girsa here, which is B'nai Medina, the people of the state, the people of the city, namely your regular Joe, your average balabas, because there are not a lot of Talmidei Chachamim around them, kekusim damo. Ouch, that's not good. You got to make sure you have a Rebbe to make sure you're not treated like a kusi in halacha. We have to make sure that when we don't know questions, that we have the people to ask. I heard a story about Rav Shlomo Wolbe that when he turned 80, I think one of his Rabbeim had passed away. He finally, at the age of 80, decided he no longer needed a Rebbe. So we all have a little bit of time. Between now and then, we should always have a Rebbe. And even after then, we should always have a Rebbe, someone who really is holding in halacha and in hashkafa, someone who can guide us in eitzah, pastorally, emotionally, socially, whatever is necessary. Because without that, not only are you up a creek for a variety of reasons in halacha, but you're treated like a kusi. You're treated like someone who might make a mistake in halacha. Okay, so says the Gemara, Bishlam, I understand I understand why things look a little bit funny with the benches, because the benches belong to Nachrim. The Nachrim are trying to sell the benches, and it looks a little bit like Mekach Memkar. It looks like you're trying to be involved in business. That I understand. To Michael's point, Bekur de Kiso Nami, Dilma Mishtalfin Vasi Asvinhu Arba Amos Bershus Harabim. There too, the shoes they can slip off. And I'm afraid it's like a woman's heels. I'm afraid that they may crack, and then a woman can wear heels on Shabbos. I'm not saying she keeps giving it as an example theoretically. But if a person were their shoes were to crack and they may end up carrying them, so these shoes also, they were relatively easy to fall off. And then what would happen is that a person might carry them, and that would be problematic as well. Ella Rochzin, my time alone. What's the? I don't understand what the problem is. Why can't two brothers go to the mikveh together? There's no hirhurim. They're two brothers. There's no hirhurim with a brother and a sister. Even Allah writes that a father and a daughter can sleep with kiruv basar. It's mutter. It's mutter ladin as long as there's no hirhurim. We don't assume that there are hirhurim. Certainly two brothers. Where did all this come from? So it says the Gemara 3/4 of the way down. Kedetanya, we have a brisa. The brisa writes, "Imakol adam rochetz." A person is allowed to go to the mikveh with anyone. A man can go to the mikveh with anyone, chutz, except for may aviv, his father-in-law, v'chamav, his father. The chamav, his father-in-law, ubaal imo, his stepfather, ubaal achoso, the husband of his sister. All of these people could lead to hirhurim, not because they themselves are baalei hirhur. When a man sees another man, it doesn't generate hirhur. But when he sees a person who's intimate with his mother, so then that can generate a hirhur of I was born through an act of intimacy, and that can generate hirhurim. Rabbi Yehuda matir ba'aviv mipnei kvod aviv. Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter with a father to go bathing with a father to go to the mikvah mipnei kvod aviv if it's appropriate cover for him. The same would be true for a stepfather. So says the Gemara, and the Chachamim came along and they made a gzeira that we don't allow. These are the people who lived in the city where they said that the two brothers can't go to the mikveh together. We don't allow the two brothers to go to the mikveh together because of a gzeira that is similar to the brother-in-law of their sister's husband. So because a man is not allowed to go to the mikveh with his sister's husband, so therefore we're going to have a gzeira that he can't even go to the mikveh with his own blood brother. Forget about his sister's husband, even his blood brother. So one of them had a gzeira and one of them did not. Tana as well, just as an aside, says the Gemara, Talmud lo yirchasim rabo. Talmud should not go to the mikveh with his Rebbe. V'im rabo tzarech lo muter. But if the Rebbe needs guidance, then it's permissible. 20 years ago, I was going to the mikveh in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, and I was standing there in the corner. I had just gotten there. One of the Rebbeim walked in and didn't see me, and he got himself ready to go to the mikveh. So I just stood there and faced the wall. We try not to go to the mikveh with our rabbeim. In the Chicago mikvahs, it's very difficult to do that. And there's good shilas about it back and forth. Okay, fine. But the one should try and be sensitive where they can. Anyways, that's why these three cities had these three concerns. In regards to the first case, what were we talking about? We were talking about a case of the mikvah. We just said what our concern was, that it was a gzeira mishum balachosa, the husband of one sister, that it could lead to hirhurim, thinking about tashma shamita. And in the second concern with the shoes, we were concerned about carrying on Shabbos. In the third case of Saf Salam, we were concerned about Mekach or Memkar. And that's why each of these respective cities had their concerns. Says the Gemara, Says the Gemara, approximately 12 to 15 lines from the bottom, a few lines before the Gemara gets to the widest lines. Ki asa Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, when Rabbi Bar Bar Chana traveled, he came in Eretz Yisrael. There was a minhag to eat a certain kind of fat of an animal, a certain type of chelev, and in Bavel it was not allowed. So similar in that it was mutter ladina, but in Eretz Yisrael it was mutter. But in Bavel there was an isser, there was a minhag to not do so. So ki asa Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. Achal de Isra. He ate this type of chelev, which by him was technically mutter, but in the city in which he was eating, it was not appropriate to eat that type. They had a minhag not to. So here's what happened. Oh, legabe Rabbi Vira Saba v'Rabbi Bered Rav Huna. Two great Amoraim walked into the room while he was having breakfast. He was eating this chelev that is mutter to eat in Eretz Yisrael, and there's a minhag not to eat it in Bavel. All of a sudden came in the Chazin who Kasim. He tried to cover it up, but they saw what was going on. He would have been better off not covering anything. Then it looks like regular chelev, but it's the guilty face. You're sitting there like, oh, what are you guys looking at? So he covers over the chelev of the Isra, which is only mutter in Eretz Yisrael and not here. So what they did, they saw it. The last of the short lines, Zasu v'amar leila Abaye. They went to go tell Abaye, Amar lehu shavinchu kekusai. He's treating you like a kusi, and that he thinks that by you it's not allowed. He thinks that by you it's not allowed, but by him it is mutter. The Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, Leslie Haditznan, what about our Mishnah? Why aren't you taking the chumras of the place that you're going to? We said, first of the long lines, Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, we said, Nosnan Alav Chumrei HaMakom Sheyatz Misham, Chumrei HaMakom Shahalach Lisham. You should have chumras in both directions. So if in Bavel there's a minhag not to eat the chelev d'Isra, so okay, you find that it's mutter to eat in Eretz. Why are you eating it here? You're not allowed to eat it in Bavel. That's not appropriate. You're supposed to take on the chumras. That's our Mishnah, the beginning of Parak Makom Shenagu. So why are you still eating it? So the Gemara gives a couple of very creative answers. Here's answer number one. Amar Abaye Hani Mili, when do we have the parameters of stringencies from one place to another by minhagim? Hani Mili mi Bavel leBavel mi Eretz Yisrael mi Eretz Yisrael. Only within one locale. If you're in Eilat and you're going to load, fine. Then we apply the rules that if in Eilat and load, there are different minhagim, you take the chumras of both places. You're going from Pumpadisa to whatever, to another place, fine. That's when we would say that the rules apply. But when you're going from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel or vice versa, maybe that would not work. Haval mi Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, lo. Okay, that's not true. When a person, I skipped a line. Inami, a second possible answer is third wide line. Inami, maybe the halacha is not just that limited within Bavel or limited within Eretz Yisrael. Inami, says the Gemara, as a second approach as to how we explain how Rabbi Bar Bar Chana was able to eat this chelev, the chelev d'Isra in Bavel. Why was it allowed? Inami mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael. It's only true when a person goes from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. So then we take on the chumras of each place. However, Aval mi Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, if a person goes from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, that's what Rabbi Bar Bar Chana did. So there, that's not true. No, we do not say that the rules of chumras, the chumras of minhagim apply in both cases. Why not? Because kevan de'anan kaifinan lehu avdinan kivasaychu. Because Bavel should be kafuf to Eretz Yisrael. An important Gemara as it relates to the halachic analytics of Talmud Bavli versus Talmud Yerushalmi. Even though that's not the way we do things, we typically side with the Bavli. Though there are, of course, times where we side like the Yerushalmi, but this Gemara is not meant to be super expansive. It's meant to be limited to the din of whether or not we say that the chumras of one place to another apply when you go from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. So this second answer of the Gemara as to why Rabbi Bar Bar Chana was allowed to eat the chelev the Isra. Why was he allowed to eat it? Hare, it should have been a chumrah of the Osamakum that he went to. Why would it be the chumrah of the place that he went to in Bavel? Says the Gemara, doesn't work that way because from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, so there at least they should be kaf of tim. Rav Ashi gives another answer 4 lines into the wide lines. Rav Ashi Amar Filu Tema Eretz Yisrael Bavel. Even if you want to say that all the rules of the chumrah from where your starting place and the chumras of your ending place, they should both be kept. There should be chumras lakan lakan. Doesn't make a difference. But here, that's only true if you don't intend on coming back. But Rabbi Bar Bar Chana was only visiting Bavel. He wasn't staying forever. But Rabbi Bar Bar Chana daito lachzor hava. This plays in halachically into the sugya of when we keep 2 days of Yantiv. Is it daito lachzor? Is it ain't daito lachzor? And this is a famous line that Rav Moshe Feinstein uses in his Chuvos and Igros Moshe to indicate that when a person has daito lachzor, you're planning on going back to America after the Chagim. So then, Ladina, one should try and keep both days of Yantiv Afalpi that you live in a place where they're only keeping 1 day. Stam, as an aside, I remember when I was in Smicha, Rabbi Rothkopf gave a shiur as a Talmud of the Rav. He gave a shiur on the halachic status of Eilat, whether or not Eilat was considered to be part of Eretz Yisrael proper versus not proper part of Eretz Yisrael, kibush rishona, kibush lasi lavo, but not kibush rishona. A whole big sugya on whether or not they should keep 2 days. Okay, just food for thought. 5 lines from the bottom. Amar le Rabba bar bar Chana, in regards to the eating of this isra, of this type of chalev, and he said, Lebrei, he said to his son as follows, Bini, lo tochal, you are not allowed to eat this, lo befanai velo shelo befanai. You can't eat it in front of me. You can't eat this chalev in front of me, and you certainly can't eat it shelo befanai. Why not? Ani, says Rabba bar bar Chana, Sheraisi es Rav Yochanan she'achal, I saw Rav Yochanan eat this with my own 2 eyes. So for me, kedai hu Rav Yochanan lismoch alav, b'fanav v'shelo b'fanav. I saw with my own 2 eyes. I can rely on Rav Yochanan. You, however, ata lo ra'iso, so lo sochal. You who never saw it, lo sochal bein b'fanai bein shelo b'fanai. You shouldn't be able to eat it ever. You shouldn't be able to eat it at all. It's very strange. Rabbi bar bar Chana saw it from Rav Yochanan. So Rabbi bar bar Chana held that you're allowed to eat the isra, but you're not allowed to let anybody else. But then your own father, you see your own father eating this. Why can't you trust him? Why can't you trust your own father? The Meforshim are bothered by this. It's very strange. So some of the Meforshim explain the reason why is because when you are a posek, you're allowed to quote from your Rebbe. But if you're not able in your own learning to get to the same psak as your Rebbe, you can't paskin it for other people. He may have seen Rabbi Yochanan eat it, and Rabbi Yochanan may have been able to figure out halachically why it's mutter to eat this in this person. Maybe, that's fine. But Rabbi bar bar Chana was not able. So here's how Rabbi bar bar Chana worked. When I see my Rebbe eating it, af al pi that I don't understand every nuance as to why it's mutter for me to eat, but he's my Rebbe and I'm kafuf to him. I don't have to understand everything he says. But when I'm the posek and I'm paskening for others, I can't paskin something that my Rebbe paskin if I don't understand how to paskin it. I know what he said, but I don't know why he said what he said. So therefore, his brain wasn't able to understand to the same latitude that, to the same levels that Rav Yochanan was. So therefore, he would not allow his son to eat it. In fact, there's a built-in contradiction here about Rabbi bar bar Chana to himself. We saw the case of Rabbi bar bar Chana just now, where he was allowed to eat this particular type of chayla, but he wouldn't allow his child. Yet we see a contradiction in terms in the following way. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. Rabbi bar bar Chana contradicted himself. The Amar Rabbi bar bar Chana says, Sachli Rabbi Yochanan ben Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Elazar taught the following: Pamachas nichnasti achar Reb Shimon ben Rabbi Yossi ben Lekunya Legina. Rabbi Yochanan ben Elazar followed Rav Shimon ben Rabbi Yossi ben Lekunya into the garden, turning to the top of an aleph from the base. The natal sfiche krub, and he took cabbage, the leaves of cabbage, v'achal v'nasanli, and he ate it and he gave it to me. V'amar li b'ni, and he said to him as follows: B'fanai echol shelo b'fanai lo sochal. You're allowed to eat this when you are in front of me, but not when you're not in front of me. Different than we saw before. Anisha ra'isi es Reb Shimon ben Yochai she'achal. I saw that he ate the sfiche kruv, he ate the cabbage. We'll see why shortly he was able to eat the cabbage. Kedai Reb Shimon ben Yochai lismoch alav b'fanav v'shelo b'fanav. I saw it with my own 2 eyes, so therefore it's allowed. However, you're not allowed. Ata b'fanai echol. You can eat it in front of me. Shelo b'fanai lo sochal. But when you're not in front of me, you're not allowed. So this is a contradiction with Rabbi bar bar Chana and himself. On the previous page, when he said that I didn't understand the psak of my Rebbe, he wouldn't let his son eat the fats, whether or not it was in front of him. But here he distinguishes and says, when it's in front of me, you're allowed. When it's not in front of me, you're not allowed. The Gemara doesn't answer the question. It leaves it as a question mark. This is an unanswered question, a contradiction within Rabbi bar bar Chana, and to just clearly chisel out the issue that Rabbi bar bar Chana was conflicted with was whether or not, if you see a psak yourself and you're a posek and you can't rebuild the psak from scratch, can you teach it to others in part or in full? That is effectively what is going on here. My Reb Shimon, this shita that we saw that a person is allowed to eat the sviche kruv, that a person is allowed to eat leaves of cabbage, what's the deal with that? The Tanya, the Brisa writes, Reb Shimon Omer, kol ha-svicha nasur, when it comes to shvi, seir, shmita, everything that grows is going to be asur, chutz misviche kruv, she'en kayotze bahen b'yarak hasadeh. It's very unique. The Meforshim point out that there's no times of the year that it stops growing at all. It's constantly growing. It's not like it has a season like perennials. Part of the year it grows, part of the year it doesn't. It's not like that. It has a uniqueness to it. Because it never stops growing, so it never triggers that threshold of becoming shvis. The Chachamim argue with Reb Shimon and say that's not true. All vegetation is going to be problematic. The Tarvaihu Aliba Rabbi Akiva, both of them really are within the camp of Rabbi Akiva in the following way. The Brisa writes a third of the way down on Aleph from Beis Tanya. Hein lo nizra v'lo ne'esov estivu asenu. They should not be planted and they should not be gathered. Amar Rabbi Akiva, an obvious question in the pasuk. If you're saying that they're not planted, how can you harvest? If you're telling me that you can't plant it, what's the havamina that you should be able to gather it? That's ridiculous. The pasuk is beyond redundant. Of course, you can't harvest that which you don't plant. So we see the pasuk went out of its way to teach us that the svichin are asurin. So what's the machlokas? Rabbanan sabre gazrinan sviche kruvatu sha'ar sviche de'alma. The Rabbanan were of the opinion that we extend a gzeira of sviche kruv to other sviche de'alma, to all types of vegetation, to everything. Reb Shimon savar lo gazrinan sviche kruvatu sviche de'alma. We don't extend this concern, and that's the machlokas we have in our Gemara. But that's how we got to the sheet of Reb Shimon. All of this is an aside. We were trying to just show the steer within Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. And the second source of Rabbi Bar Chana was about the cabbage, so therefore the Gemara wanted to figure out how that happened. The answer is it's from Reb Shimon and the Brisa. I'll leave it to Rabbi Akiva. At the two dots, halfway down, we're going to go until a couple lines before the end of the page. Says the Gemara as follows: Haholech mimakom. We said that if a person in the Mishnah, in the Mishnah, at the beginning of the parak and the bottom of Nun Amud Aleph, we said that if a person goes from one place to another, so then the chumras apply from both places. So asks the Gemara a question that I alluded to before. And I got it. You want to tell me that a person's in a city where they normally have an Isser Malacha on Erev Pesach, and they're going to a city where they don't do Malacha. So then I understand what it means to be Machmer. I won't do Malacha. I understand. I understand. I won't do the Malacha. I got it. My city, we do malacha, no problem. Your city, you don't. When I go to your city, I'm a mensch. I keep your rules. That's what the Mishnah, that I understand. But what if it's the reverse? If you're going from a place where you live, nobody keeps the halacha. Nobody has an Isser Malacha on Erev Pesach. And you go to a city, to a place where people do malacha. So what's the chumrah? So al yishana adam ibnei machlokas v'ne'avid. What does that mean? How are you machmir to not do malacha? No, they don't do malacha. How are you machmir? What are you going to do? They already don't do malacha. What's the chumrah? That you do malacha? That doesn't make sense. Just don't do the malacha. So then you're the same as in the city that you're in. What are the chumras from both places? It says the Gemara, that doesn't work in this case. Because when you're going from a place that doesn't have an Isser Malacha to a place that when you go from a place that does have an Isser Malacha to a place that doesn't have an Isser Malacha, the math doesn't work. Amar Abaye, you're right. These rules of a Chumra Lakan and Chumra Lakan are only on the ratio, only on the beginning part, only on a case where you're going from a locale where it's a place where it's osin to a place of anos, and that makes sense. Says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom. Rava doesn't agree. Rava Amar, he says that's not correct. The Olam HaSeif, it even applies to the end where you're going from a place that doesn't do malacha to a place that does. Here's Pshat. Ein bezumi bnei shim and machlokas. What the Mishnah means is that this isn't going to generate any machlokas. What are they going to say about you? Maika amras. What are they going to say? Haro omer malacha asura. It appears that you hold that malacha is asura. Meimar amre kama badlane habib shuka. They'll just say you're lazy. They say, or there's not a lot for you to do. There's not a lot of work for you to do. So there will be no machlokas here. People will just assume that you hold like they do. We'll stop here at Amalei Rav Safar. Here's Hashem pick up tomorrow night for Daf Nun Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.